Welcome to Appeal to Heaven. I am your host, Jonah Schultz. Thank you for joining me here today. I'm a little bit under the weather right now. I got a sick 2-year-old. I got a sick pregnant wife. But if I'm a little bit sniffly, a little bit hoarse today, apologies. But I got my tea here, lemon, honey, a little bit of whiskey to get me through. So hopefully we'll have a smooth show today. But the news right now is a little bit slow, a little bit on the slow side. I think we all kind of feel like we're hanging on the edge of the knife, waiting for something to happen in the Middle East and Iran. That's obviously kind of been the focal point of everybody's attention shifting. And that's been really one of the great tragedies of the Trump administration, is that we have become so hyper-focused on foreign policy. Trump, going all the way back to 2015, and obviously in this most recent election, he was elected, put in office, specifically to address domestic affairs, specifically to pull us out of foreign entanglements. And the whole circumstances surrounding everything that has made us now hyper focused on everything else except what's going on within our borders is really quite a shame, and something that I think we'll look back on in the Trump administration and say, man, what a missed opportunity, when the population was primed and ready for true America First policy and initiatives and strong governance. We reverted back to the George Bush era. And so we are kind of now in that period where we're in limbo, right? We're a little bit in limbo. What's going to happen? We just had the State of the Union last night. I don't know if you watched. I didn't watch. I watched some clips, but to be honest, I've seen this before, right? I've seen a lot of people talk. I've seen a lot of words been put in my face. Words that have been empty my entire life. And so I know exactly what Trump was going to say at the State of the Union. I didn't watch it. I've heard it all at this point. I've heard it all. And I heard some quotes from Trump and some things that were shared, and they're great. Great things. You know, it was great that he shouted out the family of Irina Zhurutska going over the horrible stabbing when the black man on the train assaulted that poor young white woman, from the Ukrainian refugee. As a matter of fact, she survived a ground war in Ukraine, but can survive being on public transportation with blacks in this country. That really tells you a lot. That was great. He had some great one-liners. Obviously, the Democrats. You had the individual for the congressman whose name escapes me right now, holding up the "Black people aren't apes" sign, and you know, the individual that has like some of the most unkept facial hair and big long hair, and honestly is an individual that kind of looks like the kid from Jumanji, right, when he starts to turn into that. I mean, and that's not has anything to do with him being black. It's just the facial hair and the hair that he keeps makes him look very, I don't know, just it certainly doesn't look like a congressman to me. Certainly doesn't look like a congressman. Honestly, he looks like somebody who should probably be working the front desk at a 7-Eleven. Well, he's not Indian, but, you know, a convenience store, something of that kind. He would look more fit for that part because he doesn't look like a professional individual. Again, it has nothing to do with him being black. He just doesn't look professional. But I've heard it all. I've heard the promises. I've heard the rah-rah moments. I used to sit and watch the State of the Union, you know, year after year, whether it was a Republican or a Democrat. I would sit there and I would watch it and I would engage with it, and I'd, you know, listen to Joe Biden or Barack Obama, and I'd listen to them and I'd say, man, these guys are liars. They're full of crap. You know, all they do is lie. They're horrible people, blah, blah, blah. And then I would listen to Trump. I'd say, yeah, you know, this is the guy. We're getting behind him. We're going to make America great again. Suck it, Democrats. And then here I find myself, and maybe you feel the same way, finding yourself in 2026 and thinking to yourself, man, I don't know if I can still digest this. I don't know if I can still watch this and hear this and then have none of it be actually backed up. And so I didn't watch it, not really even interested in what was said, because at the end of the day, I've heard a lot of great words. I've heard a lot of great speeches. I need results. I need tangible results. I need something real, something that I can see, that we can feel, a change, something that is a real shift in making America great again. Get a little bit of that whiskey right here. So Last episode, I spent a big chunk of the episode specifically talking about our hyperfixation on Israel, the odd worship that so many in the Christian community, especially in the American community, have of the Jewish people. Obviously, the massive Jewish control that we see in pretty much all of our institutions throughout the West, right? There's really no exception to it. And there's a lot of engagement on social media, people arguing, going back and forth. And it's funny because every single time I talk about something like this, it's like I feel like I have to catch up on it, because just in the past few days since I've spoken about this, you had Mike Huckabee talking with Tucker Carlson, Mike Huckabee, the American ambassador to Israel, but you would feel like it was the other way around. You'd feel like he's actually the Israeli ambassador to the United States lobbying us on behalf of Israel. It's never really the other way around. But he goes on Tucker Carlson and they have a back and forth. But the one thing Mike Huckabee says is that it would be fine if Israel took the entire Middle East because it's theirs. Then you have just last night, Lindsey Graham, right? The man, the deeply closeted, as Norm Macdonald would say, the deeply closeted Lindsey Graham going to the State of the Union, and he brings David Ellison as his guest, the Jewish son of billionaire Larry Ellison, right? The guy, Oracle billionaire, the new TikTok owner, the guy who's always lobbying everybody on behalf of bombing the Middle East, on behalf of Israel. These are the people that are running the show, all right? So it's not like it's mysterious. And that's why it's so puzzling to me when conservatives, especially those on the right, get angry with me for pointing this out, and they get this rabid type of response. And you just say, this is so obvious. It's right in front of your face. They're not even hiding it, right? Lindsey Graham posted this on social media. Great to have. He's like, great to have David Ellison post a picture with him. They're rubbing our noses in it. They're saying, this is the way things are. This is the way it's going to be. This is the way it's going to continue. And you're going to like it. You're going to have no say. No changes are going to be made. You can complain, you can moan, you can lament, but at the end of the day, you're not going to do anything about it. And that's been the response from our politicians as long as I've been alive, has been, you can get mad, you can get frustrated. I really don't care because you're not going to do anything about it. It's become a taunting of us. And if that doesn't make you mad, if that doesn't inspire you to change the way that you view politics, I don't know what will. They're mocking you. They're laughing at you. They're rubbing your nose in the fact that you don't have any power, that this guy like David Ellison, hey, this is the guy I listen to. This is the guy who has my ear. This is the guy who has power. This is the guy who's going to dictate my vote. Not my constituents in South Carolina, but this guy. Because he's got the cash. He's got the connections. So, that episode I had last week, every time you talk about the fact that Israel has way too much influence, that there is a massive Jewish cabal throughout the world, every time you talk about the fact that there are Christians in this country that literally worship the Jewish people, it ages like fine wine, because every single day you're proven correct. So that's all I have to say about that. I'm not going to go on a whole nother episode about that. But with the news being slow, there was a story that caught my eye, I guess for personal reasons, because I've had personal experience with it, and I think it explains a big, it illustrates the state of our country to a certain extent. But there was a snippet that came out that student loan defaults are skyrocketing. They're at their all-time highs. Over 16% of student loans are over 90 days late in payment. I mean, that's a huge number, 16%. If you thought about that in terms of housing, right, if mortgages or any kind of payments were that late, you're talking about serious economic consequences on a national or global scale for something like that. The college system has obviously become a total, utter scam, right? I can speak to that personally. I went to a liberal arts college. My big focus was, I wanted to go somewhere to play baseball, and, where could I go to play baseball and pursue my dreams in that regard and get an education kind of in the process. And so I was a business major. I just majored in finance. I wasn't a pre-med major. I wasn't uh, a veterinarian major. I wasn't a pharmaceuticals major. I didn't go deep into some sort of science or study. I was a general business degree is really the way you can look at that. And in reality, what a general business degree is you do a couple accounting classes where you scrape by because you hate accounting, right? If you're somebody like me, you take a microeconomics class, you take a macroeconomics class, you learn basic economic theory, you learn some basic understandings of markets, but that's really it. It doesn't really prepare you for any specific type of job once you get into the real world. So if you're like somebody like me, and a lot of people who are in those type of majors, you just wind up kind of graduating from college and winding up in some sort of sales position, which is great. I mean, a sales position can provide you and your family with a lot of money. It can provide you with a comfortable life. But like most sales jobs, including the one that I'm currently in, it's something that I could have done and learned without a 4-year degree. And in that process of that 4-year degree and gaining very little experience or knowledge, I graduate on the back end with close to $100,000 in debt, which is a huge amount of money. When you're talking about somebody who is 22 years old, no connections, no big job offers line up out of college, and you have $100,000 in debt, that's enormous. And so for me, for my and in my experience, I'm sharing my experience because it illustrates what so many millions of young Americans have gone through and are going through right now. I graduate from college, and the first job offer I get after 4 years in college and $100,000 in debt, the first job I have pays $32,000 a year. It was a financial job. I would travel around in my territory and I would go over individuals, their financial situation, go over their trust, make certain recommendations. And it was kind of turning into kind of like a life insurance type of sales job. And $32,000 a year. Now, for me at that time, I'm graduating college, like $32,000. That's enormous. That's more money than I've ever seen in my life. I can't imagine what that would look like all in one place. I could probably move to Beverly Hills and buy a mansion with that type of money. That's kind of how it felt to somebody like me. But then I started to do the math, and you started to see, okay, well, this is taken out in taxes, so this is what I'm taking home every 2 weeks. I'm living with my parents, working, and this is what it cost. This is what it's going to cost me to rent a place. My student loans are $600 a month. This is what groceries would cost. Utilities. Maybe if I want to have a beer now and again, blah, 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 which really wasn't even factored in the budget. And by the time I'm done with all of that, I'm like, wait, I am well short of being able to make ends meet and have no ability to move out on my own. No ability to move out on my own. And so something in me at that point started to be shaken and said, what am I going to do? Am I trapped forever? Is this like a prison cell I'm now in? When I was 18 years old, did I make this decision? And now the rest of my life is going to be suppressed as a result. That was the fear I started to have. And it's a real fear that millions of young Americans are going to have. And it made me fearful for the future. And so what ultimately happened with me is I was able to move out because I split rent 3 ways in a duplex in Cleveland with 2 of my buddies. And we did what we had to do, right? I was paying like $300 a month. It was $900 a month for the 3 of us, right? For just to rent out that area. And we got a steal on it, to be honest. And so paying $300 a month, that was the only way I could move out. I was paid $300 a month. I had no money left over after each month, right? That was it. I was exhausting everything that I had. And you have all these young people trying to get into the world, trying to come into the workforce, and most of them, because of the rent situation, the housing situation, their student loans, they just give up. They say, what am I supposed to do? This is an impossibly large task. And for many people, it really is. For many people, especially dependent on where you live, there's no way to make enough money to be able to afford a home and pay your student loans. And so you just start throwing your money into rent just to make ends meet. Then groceries go up and gas goes up and everything goes up and you just feel trapped. And so people get depressed. They don't have families, they don't get married, they don't have children. And it's this whole cascading effect from this broken education system that made these grandiose promises and never delivered. And I've always said, whether it was when I was running for office or now, that Republicans made a generational mistake by not speaking to this issue. Because what was the response? You had people like me, right? And I have never been on the left in my life, never voted Democrat, never will. Unless something crazy happens, right? And the parties switch and all of a sudden the Democrats are the Make America Great Again party that wants to preserve the demographics of this country, our historical demographics, which will never happen. What happened was you had all these people, right, who are upset. All these young people, they're upset, they're anxious, they're afraid, they're hopeless. And so you have the Democrat Party who's going out there and saying, you know what? We feel your pain, we hear you, and we're going to forgive your student loans. That was their option. And then you had the GOP and the Republicans who said, you know what? You made the choice, you took out the loan, now you got to live with it. So imagine yourself in this situation. You are 22 years old. You just graduated college. You have $100,000 in student loans. You can't afford rent. You can't move out of your parents' house. You can't afford groceries. You have very little hope of any kind of economic mobility. What message is going to resonate with you? What message are you going to lean towards? Where do you think you're going to cast your vote? For the people who say screw you, when you were 18 years old, you made a massive mistake. When you were 18 years old, you made the decision to take out these loans when you were a child and had no understanding of how these loans work or how they'd impact your life. So screw you. Or the side that says, you know what, we're on your side, we're going to forgive your loans. Now, for the longest time, I would take the side of the GOP kind of standing line. You know what, you made a decision, you have to own up to it. But then the longer I thought about it, I started to think, you know what? I was 18 years old. I had no understanding of these things. These loans that I received were incredibly predatory in nature, right? They understand that they can take these young children, is what they are when they're 18 years old. You're really a child in most ways. I know we like to say 18-year-old are adults. You don't have a fully functioning brain, and you don't have understanding of the way the world works. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have accountability in other ways, but let's be real about what an 18-year-old is. And so these loan sharks, which is really what they are, go out and they understand that you're somebody like me who, let's say, I've been told my whole life I need to get this education in order to be successful. I have dreams of playing baseball in college. And, dreams of playing baseball at the next level beyond that. So I need to go to college to be able to have a chance to do that. What do you think I'm going to do? Even if I was in the situation where somebody really explained to me and I understood it, I would still say, you know what? It means that much to me. I need to go take that risk. You're taking advantage of desperate people. Either people who are desperate, young people who are desperate, or young people who don't understand. And that's a truly evil thing when you think about it. So my view on it began to evolve where I would say, you know what, I understand, but also at the same time, we shouldn't go down the loan forgiveness route, because at the end of the day, we shouldn't be picking the pockets of those who paid their loans, right? We shouldn't be dipping into anybody's pockets to pay anybody else's loans. And I think that's a very reasonable opinion to have. A very reasonable opinion to have. But ultimately, I started to sit back and say, you know what? Everybody gets bailed out. Everybody. The banks get bailed out. The corporations get bailed out. Foreign countries get bailed out. When a country like Argentina, not Israel, not our greatest ally, Argentina, some South American country, has economic woes, we say, you know what? We're going to start buying up all your beef. We're going to start sending you cash. We do this to governments all around the globe, and we say, here's cash, here's cash, here's cash. We have millions of illegal immigrants flooding in year after year after year, going to the emergency room for their health care, not paying a dime, not paying for education, not paying taxes. I'm paying for that too. And I'm supposed to sit here and watch all of this going on while we have pedophile billionaires, spies, raking in cash, getting paid off, doing all these horrible things. The Epstein files, you can imagine everything, right, in this whole cabal bubble. We have all of this going on, and we're stared in the face as young Americans who have student loans we're told to do this, and we're being told, hey, you need to pay up, pal. Honestly, screw that. Screw that. I'm not paying my student loans. You shouldn't either if you have them. You're lucky we pay taxes at all for this crap that we have to eat every single day. You're really going to take my face, hold my eyes open, show me all the crap that you've been doing. All the money that you send, all of our money that you take already. Our futures that you have mortgaged through debt, that you have destroyed our jobs through mass immigration, destroyed our homes, our cultures, everything about it, and you're telling me I got to foot the bill for decisions I made when I was 18 years old? No, screw that. Screw that. There's money for everything else. There's money for everything else. There's always money for Israel. There's always money for war. There's always money for immigrants. There's always money for refugees. There's always money for everybody else. There's always money for senior citizens. There's always money for Social Security. There's always money for Medicaid, Medicare. There's always money to abolish property taxes, right? There's money to do everything for everybody else. And so I ain't paying them. I'm not. I'll defer. And the odds that they even make us pay it anyway are very slim. But I'm not giving them my money. And to bring it back to the point about the GOP had such a golden opportunity to say, you know what? We hear you. We understand. We can't forgive them because we don't want to take money out of other people's pockets. But we're going to start holding universities accountable. We're going to start dipping into these endowments. We're going to start saying, you know what? These universities, if they're going to bring you in, they are going to be partially responsible for these loans so that way they have an incentive to match you with a high-paying job. This isn't brain surgery, guys, not rocket science. It's not complicated. It's very simple. There are very simple approaches to be able to solve this problem. But why is the GOP and the Democrat Party, for that matter, refuse to do those simple things? Because who's got the money? These big universities, the big donors who belong to these universities or alumni of these universities, right? Who are the people? Do you think you're the one who has the money? Somebody like me or you who has $100,000 in student debt, they don't care what we think. They're poor. They can't influence an election, but these rich people can. We have to start looking at everything in that way. That we are getting treated like dogs so that other people can live like kings. And it sounds very socialist for me to say something like that. It kind of sounds like a Karl Marx type of thing to say, but it's true. Not true from the standpoint of, okay, we should redistribute wealth, but true from the standpoint of we don't live in a true capitalist society because all of these people get preferential treatment. And we get treated like dogs. The average person gets treated like a dog. Everybody gets bailed out. Everybody has what they need except us. And then Even think of the people who were paying their salaries, were making their lives possible. People like Tony Gonzalez. Tony Gonzalez is a congressman from Texas who's been a horrible Republican congressman for a long time. He was just outed. This is an individual with a large family, mind you, really like 6 children. Outed as having an affair with his paid government, tax-paid staffer, having an affair, pressuring her into sending sexual pictures and all these different things, having an affair with her, pressuring her when she wanted to be out of this affair to continue it, and she set herself on fire as a result. And she was married, by the way, too. When you put in perspective how evil these people are, and this is a GOP representative, everything makes sense. Most congressmen are awful, horrible people. Most of them. And not horrible in that like they're mean or they're nasty. Like they do horrible things. They are involved in horrible practices. They are people that you would not allow to be your friends. You would not allow to be around your children. You wouldn't even want them being part of your community. Yet we elect them time and time again to represent, was it 750,000 people in a congressional district? These are the people. Same people who are telling people like me, hey, you got to pay up, buddy. You got to pay up. No, I'm done. I'm done doing it. And I honestly think for a lot of people, the conversation of do we disengage ourselves financially from the federal government, that is a conversation that is growing and a justified conversation. Do you think, just from a basic principled standpoint, do you think that this government or the government we've had for the last 20, 30 years, one, has done good things with your money, or two, is worthy in any way of your contribution? I would argue, and I think it's very plain, that the reality of the situation is they have taken your money and used it to the detriment of you. They've taken your money and used it for the benefit of others to the detriment of you. So not only are they taking your money, not only are they punishing you, but then they're taking it and they're turning around and slapping you in the face. They're saying, I'm going to take your tax dollars and I'm going to take your job and your home. That's what we're dealing with. And in that same vein, something that hits close to home here in Ohio, with these awful here in Ohio, if you're not familiar with Ohio is a red state from the standpoint of we have a Republican supermajority in the House and the Senate here in Ohio. We have a Republican governor. We have Republican control of the Supreme Court. Every aspect of Ohio's government is GOP controlled deeply. Ohio also has certainly more of what you would consider a traditionally conservative culture. It's gone back and forth politically, mostly due to the union effect, right? You had a lot of people in the Youngstown area, Cleveland, Cincinnati, that a lot of white middle class to lower class workers who voted Democrat for a long time because of the union connection. But now, as the Democrat Party has gone further and further left, they have left that type of voting pattern. But we have Mike DeWine here in Ohio, and it's fun. The funny thing about Mike DeWine is he only ever shows up when it's time to pander to the left. Only ever shows up when it's time to go on national TV and pander to the left, right? So Mike DeWine is in his second term as Ohio governor, and it was always fed to us. We've had such horrible Republican governors in this state. We went from John Kasich to Mike DeWine, if that tells you anything about the state of Ohio. But we have Mike DeWine, who is the COVID prince of Ohio, right? He was the media darling because he was the Republican going out on CNN, going out NBC on the media tour constantly and saying, Ohio is the model, right? Republicans need, to lead on this issue. And he was the king of masks, the king of vaccinations, the king of lockdowns, kept Ohio locked down as long as really any blue state outside of maybe California, handled COVID horribly, was an absolute tyrant. And the funny thing about the guy is he fits that kind of Napoleon wasn't as short as they display him to us, but he fits that kind of little Napoleon because he's literally like 5'4" or something like this. This is a very sad looking old weak man, but somebody who wields power actually very effectively. If you think about it, he's somebody who he determines what he wants to accomplish, and what he wants to accomplish, he accomplishes. And so I'll take my hat off to him for that. But he goes on Face of the Nation, CBS, and the scrutiny has been heightened on the Haitian population in Springfield, around the Columbus area. Obviously, this was something that was discussed at length during the 2024 presidential campaign. They're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs, right? We're having these Haitians in this massive scale, right? It's not just Haitians. It was a illustration of the third world immigrants at large coming into all of these communities and totally destroying them, taking jobs, destroying the quality of life, making it less safe, making it dirtier, doing these really weird things like eating cats and dogs, which is they tried to make into a joke, but was a very real thing, because that's what they do. So we are seeing kind of in the new ice age that we're living in, but the age where we have this hyperfixation on mass deportations and the demographic replacement, that there's been a lot of talks and a lot of urging from right-wing and conservative individuals in Ohio saying we need ICE to come into Springfield and places like it throughout Ohio and get these Haitians out because their visas, their protective status is expired. They need to go. And Mike DeWine goes out, and this is what he says. One of the things he says on Face of the Nation, he says, Springfield is an industrial city, manufacturing city. That was down. It has been coming back. And frankly, one of the reasons it is coming back is because of the Haitians who are working there. This is the type of rhetoric. If you're a Republican, if you're an American, if you're somebody who loves your community, this is the type of rhetoric that should infuriate you. This is the type of rhetoric that should make you get out the tar and the feathers. What is this saying? And this isn't the first time Mike DeWine has said something like this. He's been saying this since Trump made the initial comments. What Mike DeWine is ultimately saying is, you know what? The people of our Springfield, the Ohioans, the more heritage Americans, right? The people who have been here for generations, they suck. They're stupid. They're incapable. They don't work hard. And so what we really needed to turn around Springfield was to bring in a bunch of Haitians because they're smarter, more capable, harder working, and honestly just better. So we need them. That's what he's saying. The funny part about what he's actually saying is that when you actually look at Haitians in general of the population, it's such a laughable comment. Reminder, I think I might have talked about this on the last episode or my first episode. Since 2020, we've imported like 6% of the entire Haitian population, like the entire island, right? The entire nation of Haiti. We've taken 6% of those people and brought them over here. So this is no small thing. The average Haitian IQ is 67. Yeah, 67. Not 167, 67. The average American IQ is right around 100. To put that in perspective. 67. So, for example, if you have a 67 IQ, you're considered mentally retarded. You are probably somebody who's not really capable of working, keeping a home. You might not even understand like cause and effect. You're somebody that is not capable of participating in a normal way in society. 67. The Haitian literacy rate is 40%. Excuse me, the illiteracy rate. Haiti, the homicide, 60.9 per 100K. That is 10 times higher than the USA homicide rate. The annual income in Haiti is $1,700. We are bringing in these people en masse and saying they are going to make our communities better. And in this case, Mike DeWine is saying have made our communities better. Now, I would wager that the reality is in Springfield, like so many places, that the big corporations didn't want to pay Americans a living wage. They didn't want to take the time to train them or invest in training them, invest in keeping them, they didn't want to give them health care or benefits or any of these things. And so Americans said, why am I going to work hard? Why am I going to put in my 40, 50, 60 hours a week to keep a roof over my head, to feed my family, break down my body, be exhausted at the end of every day for a company who doesn't care about me, won't pay for me? At the end of the day, I can just probably go on government benefits. That's what's happened to a lot of really small towns. And so what these corporations have figured out is, hey, instead of offshoring, we can just bring the people over here, right? Get them in as refugees, get them in on visas. We can pay them less. They can have 8 families live in the same home. We don't have to give them health care. We don't have to give them any kind of retirement. We don't have to do anything except give them a basic salary because they make $1,700 back home. And so we can put a little, they can all huddle inside of a little shack in Springfield, Ohio, and they'll be happy. That's the thought process. And so you have Mike DeWine, who's a Republican in a Republican supermajority state, and the greatest crusade outside of COVID and locking everybody down of his entire political career has been defending these third world immigrants. But this is ultimately what Republicans deserve, right? This is what we deserve in Ohio, because what did we do? After Mike DeWine locked the state down, put countless thousands of businesses under, destroyed thousands, millions of lives, put kids in depression, made kids kill themselves through locking down these schools, mass people up, did all of these illogical things that destroyed lives. He was reelected overwhelmingly in the primary, Republican primary, and then in the general election. And now we are faced, as Ohioans, with riding in on his Arabian horse, we got Vivek Ramaswamy coming to make Ohio great again. So I want to ask yourself, do you think, whether you're from Ohio or another place, do you think with the way things are going, that you're going to have people like Vivek Ramaswamy, a literal anchor baby, whose father isn't even a U.S. citizen to this day, who's made his entire fortune on scamming people on Alzheimer's medications, and his entire career has been a scam? Do you think this person is going to be the one that comes in and says, you know what, we're going to clean up Springfield? We're going to get these immigrants out of here? That's laughable. Laughable. And so many people will who are on the more center right, they'll say, you're so hyper fixated on immigration, right? It's not that big of a deal. Why is that all you talk about? Why is that what you focus on so much? And the reality is this. I want to have a home. I want my children to have a home. My grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, all the way down. I want them to have a home. I want you to have a home. I want Americans to have a home. What happened in Springfield? Overnight, the federal government, in conjunction with the state government, decided that the Native Americans of Springfield were no longer allowed to have a home. That they now had to share their home or give their home up, give their jobs, give their homes, give everything up to this foreign population with the IQ of somebody who's mentally retarded. So am I supposed to sit here and say, as this has happened to town after town, city after city, state after state, all around the country, am I supposed to sit here and say and talk about marginal tax rates? Am I supposed to sit here and celebrate with the Trump administration and say, yay, I get to keep $500 more at the end of the year? Great, thank you, that's good. I'd like to keep as much money as possible, but is that really going to be my focus right now? Is that really going to be would I walk away, when I take a look at this and walk away, is that going to be my conclusion of, you know what, things aren't great, but I got a few more bucks in my pocket. I don't care if I have a few more bucks in my pocket if I'm not allowed to have a home. If I'm not allowed to have a culture. If I'm not allowed to look out my window and see kids playing if I'm not allowed to go out my door and talk to my neighbor who speaks English, if I'm not allowed to have a block party in my community that's a Christmas party or an Easter celebration. Instead, we have Diwali celebrations and Hindus walking around slapping their chests, doing weird things, erecting 50-foot statues to demon gods. What matters more to you? What do you think's more important? And that ties everything back to the conversation we had at the beginning of our fixation on foreign policy. Right here we are right now talking about, are we going to go to war with Iran when our cities all across the United States are being literally invaded and taken over by third world savages? So when you talk to people who get very upset about our fixation on Israel and Ukraine and everything that's going on outside of our borders, that's why. Because they see their home being stripped away. Maybe their hometown that they grew up in, they love, maybe their parent, they have an elderly parent who still lives there, who's still holding it together. Maybe they're irate that they go home and it doesn't feel like home. It's not recognizable. The places, the restaurants that they went, the diners that they went, the hangouts that they had all closed because they couldn't stay open. And instead of a diner, or instead of your local grocer, you used to go in and say, "Hey Randy, get me a couple mangoes and get me this and that," and yes, you have a great conversation. Or you go into your butcher shop and you say, "Hey, give me a pound of the ground chuck," and now instead it's an Indian grocer, and next door is a daycare for Somalians. Do you see how that is the most important issue? Do you see how that matters more than anything else? Because at the end of the day, that's it. If you don't have a home, it doesn't matter. If you don't have a culture, it doesn't matter. If you're not safe, it doesn't matter. That's the fight of our age. It's not going to happen overnight. We have to get these people out. We have to restore the traditional demographics and culture of this country. If you don't, you have nothing. That's the moral of this story. And people like Mike DeWine are the exact reason why I've begun to say, you know what? Maybe we finally, as Republicans, need to just walk away and say, we're taking our business elsewhere. Not to the Democrats, but we're going to find another route. We're not going to continue to hope and pray and say, oh, please, Mike DeWine, be the one who just does something good for us on the Republican side. And then open your eyes and you're getting slapped in the face. Open your eyes after saying that prayer and you're surrounded by Haitians. Guys, we can't keep doing this to ourselves. We at a certain point have to say enough is enough. We're going to do one of two things. We are going to go through the Republican primary process, and we are going to throw out all of these incumbents who have either enabled this circumstance or stood by and been silent. Either way, they have to go. We're either going to do that, or we have to say, you know what? We are going to remove ourselves from the Republican voting ranks. We are going to form our own coalition in our own interests, and we are going to find some sort of mechanism to make that happen. And if the Republican Party starts to lose election after election, that's on them. Don't let them blame you. We've given them chance after chance. So that's got to be the mindset shift that takes place. Or else we might as well say, you know what? America had a good run, but we're done. Those are your options. Do something or we're done. All right, this has been Appeal to Heaven with Jonas Schultz. Make sure you're liking and subscribing, sharing. I'll see you next time.